Johnny Carson made America laugh for 30 years, but behind the desk and the perfect timing, he didn't always love the show. The Tonight Show wasn't just television. It was pressure, ratings, expectations, the same routine, night after night. Carson hated phoniness, disliked small talk, and quietly resented guests who treated his couch like a commercial break. To Johnny, comedy wasn't about noise, it was about honesty, and that's why some guests mattered more than others. These weren't just celebrities. They were storytellers, rule breakers, and masters of timing, people who didn't perform at Carson, but met him there. They made him laugh for real. Tonight, we're counting down the 10 guests Johnny Carson loved the most, the ones who made The Tonight Show feel less like work and more like freedom.
When I think I feel that stare, and I reach out my hand to stroke his hair, and he's not there. Oh, how I wish that wasn't so. I'll always love a dog named Bo.
Number 10. Jimmy Stewart. When Jimmy Stewart walked onto The Tonight Show, something magical happened, and it had nothing to do with punchlines. Johnny Carson didn't laugh at Jimmy Stewart. He laughed with him, and sometimes, he just laughed around him. Stewart's charm came from his complete lack of polish. His stories never started where they were supposed to, rarely ended where Johnny expected, and often wandered through 3 unrelated memories before collapsing into a gentle, breathless laugh. And Johnny lived for it. Carson adored Stewart because he was the antithesis of late-night performance. No rehearsed anecdotes, no comedic ambition. Just a legendary movie star nervously trying to remember what year something happened and accidentally turning it into comedy gold. Johnny often nudged Stewart mid-story, knowing full well it would only make things more chaotic. That chaos wasn't accidental, it was authentic. Behind the scenes, Johnny deeply respected Stewart's humility. Despite being the star of It's a Wonderful Life, Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, and countless classics, Stewart never spoke like a legend. He spoke like a man who couldn't quite believe his own resume. Critics often pointed out that Stewart's Tonight Show appearances felt unusually intimate. One producer famously said Stewart never once asked how the interview would go. He simply sat down and trusted Johnny to guide him, a trust Carson never took lightly. Johnny once joked that Jimmy Stewart could make the alphabet sound suspenseful if you let him talk long enough, and maybe that's why Carson loved him. Stewart reminded Johnny that comedy doesn't need precision, sometimes it just needs sincerity, nerves, and a storyteller brave enough to wander.
Are they in the red? Are they in the black yet? On Rockford?
Number 9. James Garner. James Garner never tried to impress Johnny Carson, and that's exactly why Johnny loved him. From the moment Garner sat down, the energy changed. No showbiz sparkle, no exaggerated persona. Just calm confidence and razor-sharp honesty. Garner had a conversational style that felt refreshingly real. Whether he was talking about the Rockford Files, classic westerns, or studio politics, he spoke like a man who had seen it all and wasn't impressed by most of it. Johnny admired that. Carson hated phoniness, and Garner had none to offer. What made Garner special was his ability to be funny without ever aiming for laughs. His humor lived in pauses, raised eyebrows, and blunt observations about Hollywood nonsense. Johnny often leaned back in his chair during Garner interviews, visibly relaxed, a subtle sign of trust. Behind the scenes, Carson respected Garner's willingness to criticize the studio system openly. Garner talked candidly about contracts, blacklisting, and exploitation, topics most stars avoided on late-night television. Critics often said Garner interviews felt closer to old-school storytelling. One Tonight Show staffer recalled that Johnny never rushed Garner. He let the stories breathe. That alone said everything. Carson once said James Garner reminded him that confidence doesn't need volume, it just needs truth. And in a world of exaggerated personalities, Garner's grounded presence was a breath of fresh air. Johnny always welcomed.
How are you? It's good. It's great to see you.
It's good to see you. It's good to see anybody.
Number 8. George Burns. George Burns didn't chase laughs, he waited for them, and Johnny Carson loved him for it. Every Burns appearance followed the same delicious rhythm, the cigar, the pause, the quiet observation, and then a line so sharp it sliced straight through the audience. Johnny admired Burns not just as a comedian, but as a master technician. Burns understood timing better than anyone who ever sat in that chair. Carson often watched Burns with genuine fascination. Burns didn't rush. He didn't react to applause. He allowed silence to work for him, something Johnny himself deeply respected. Critics frequently noted that Burns could get a bigger laugh from a single sentence than most comics could get from a full routine. Behind the scenes, Johnny viewed Burns as living proof that comedy aged like fine whiskey. Burns' humor became leaner, sharper, and more confident with time. He once joked that dying young would have ruined his career, and Johnny laughed harder than anyone. One producer recalled Johnny saying, "Watch him. That's how it's done." Burns represented everything Carson admired: control, restraint, and absolute confidence in the audience's intelligence. Number 7. Bob Newhart. Bob Newhart never burst onto The Tonight Show. He quietly slipped in, sat down, and dismantled the room one pause at a time. Johnny Carson loved Newhart because his comedy trusted silence, and his famously one-sided phone calls felt effortless. But Johnny understood the discipline behind them. Every pause, every awkward glance was engineered. Carson often laughed so hard during Newhart's appearances that he physically turned away from the camera, wiping his eyes while the audience roared. What made Newhart special to Johnny was restraint. In an era of loud comics fighting for attention, Newhart let the audience come to him. Johnny admired that confidence deeply. He once said Newhart could get a laugh simply by thinking about saying something. Behind the scenes, Carson respected Newhart as a craftsman. Producers noted that Newhart was one of the few guests Johnny never interrupted. He knew better. Critics often wrote that Newhart interviews felt like master classes in timing, not just comedy. Johnny once described Newhart as proof that comedy doesn't need force, it needs faith in the audience's intelligence.
How are you?
I'm fine.
It's nice of you to be with us tonight.
Yes, I know.
What did you want to be with? Of course it is. A decent thing.
Number 6. Carol Burnett. Carol Burnett brought joyful chaos to The Tonight Show. Every appearance felt alive, unpredictable, and just slightly out of control, which is exactly why Johnny Carson adored her. Burnett had zero fear of looking foolish. She twisted her face, broke into characters, sang mid-sentence, and laughed at herself harder than anyone else in the room. Johnny loved that freedom. He often played along, letting the interview turn into something closer to improv theater. What truly impressed Carson was Burnett's range. She wasn't just funny, she was versatile. Comedy, music, storytelling, physical humor. Burnett did it all without ever feeling forced. Critics often said her Tonight Show appearances felt like a mini variety show squeezed into 10 minutes. Behind the scenes, Carson admired Burnett's generosity. She shared laughs. She made Johnny the co-star, and she never tried to dominate the spotlight. Johnny once said Carol Burnett reminded him why television was fun, not just successful. Number 5. Burt Reynolds. When Burt Reynolds walked onto The Tonight Show, the temperature changed. Johnny Carson leaned back, the audience leaned forward, and everyone knew something entertaining was about to happen. Reynolds had charisma without arrogance, a rare combination Johnny appreciated. He mocked his own heartthrob image, joked about Hollywood absurdities, and treated fame like a running gag. Johnny loved that self-awareness. What made Reynolds special was his comfort. He wasn't performing, he was present. The conversations flowed naturally, often drifting into unscripted humor. Carson trusted Reynolds to be interesting without help, which is the highest compliment a late-night host can give. Behind the scenes, Johnny and Burt shared mutual respect. Both understood pressure, expectations, and the cost of popularity. Critics often noted that Reynolds' interviews felt unusually candid, less publicity, more personality. Johnny once joked that Burt Reynolds proved confidence works best when it doesn't need explaining.
You really think so, huh?
My proctologist used to be a photographer.
Yeah.
Number 4. Ranger Field. Rodney didn't just appear on The Tonight Show, he stormed it. Johnny Carson loved Rodney because no one else demanded laughter the way he did. Dangerfield's humor was relentless, self-deprecating, and often chaotic, but behind the jokes was a performer who had fought decades for recognition. Johnny respected that tenacity deeply. Every appearance was an adrenaline rush. Dangerfield's trademark line, "I don't get no respect," wasn't just a catchphrase, it was a lifeline. He would weave personal anecdotes, wild exaggerations, and rapid-fire punchlines that left audiences gasping and Johnny wiping tears of laughter. Johnny thrived on the unpredictability. One minute you were listening to a story about a disastrous date, the next you were on a roller coaster of absurdity that only Rodney could engineer. Behind the scenes, Carson admired Rodney's work ethic. Years of rejection had sharpened his timing and honed his craft, and Johnny recognized greatness in that grind. Critics often said Dangerfield's humor was the purest form of late-night comedy, raw, unfiltered, and irresistibly human. Rodney once confessed to Johnny that he considered The Tonight Show his stage for survival, and Johnny's reaction? He laughed harder than anyone else in the room. For Carson, Rodney wasn't just a guest, he was a reminder of the humor and heart that could survive Hollywood's harshest critics.
Gloria Kowalczyk. 341. Gloria opens up at the Palace in Encino Friday. With a 341. That show is annoying, Ed.
Number 3. Don Rickles. Don Rickles was chaos with a punchline, and Johnny Carson absolutely adored it. The Merchant of Venom, as he was called, could insult an entire audience, including Johnny himself, and leave everyone laughing. Rickles' brilliance lay in his audacity. He never hesitated, never softened, and never apologized, yet somehow everyone left smiling. Every appearance on The Tonight Show felt like high-wire comedy. Rickles would pick a target, mercilessly skewer them with precision, and then somehow circle back to a place of affection. Johnny loved the tension, the thrill that anything could happen. Rickles forced Carson to be quick, reactive, and genuinely entertained, which is exactly the spark Carson craved. Behind the scenes, Carson trusted Rickles implicitly. They shared an unspoken understanding. The comedy might sting, but it was always rooted in respect. Critics often called Rickles the only comic who could hijack an entire show without wrecking it, a feat Johnny admired deeply. Rickles once told a producer he lived for these Tonight Show appearances, and Johnny's reaction? Genuine laughter, wide-eyed and unguarded. For Carson, Rickles embodied fearless comedy, a guest who could push boundaries while still making the host shine.
I'm here tonight.
No,
Oh.
but I understand that. I can understand that.
And you're getting away from your series, too, I read after...
Please don't touch me, John.
Oh, excuse me. Moved the sequin out of position there.
Number 2. Lucille Ball. Lucille Ball was television royalty, and Johnny Carson treated her like it. Every time she sat across from him, the studio seemed to pause in anticipation. Ball wasn't just a guest, she was a force of nature, commanding attention with her timing, wit, and unshakable confidence. Johnny adored Lucille because she understood comedy on a profound level. Every expression, every pause, every gesture was meticulously crafted, yet it all looked effortless. She could deliver a simple line, and the audience would erupt as if witnessing magic. Carson recognized a kindred spirit, someone who respected timing, embraced risk, and knew the power of subtlety. Behind the scenes, Johnny admired Ball's pioneering spirit. She had reshaped television, led a production company, and done it all while staying incredibly funny. Critics often noted that her interviews with Carson felt historic, not nostalgic, blending charm, intelligence, and hilarity in perfect balance. Johnny once said that Lucille Ball taught him that comedy is leadership, guide the audience, trust the timing, and always respect the craft. To him, she wasn't just a favorite guest, she was a masterclass in wit, confidence, and enduring brilliance. Number 1. Orson Welles. Orson Welles didn't just appear on The Tonight Show, he dominated it. Every entrance was electric, every line unpredictable, and every conversation a delicate dance between brilliance and chaos. Johnny Carson adored Welles because he was the one guest who could challenge him, confuse him, and still leave him laughing. Welles was larger than life in every sense. His voice, intellect, and presence demanded attention. But what fascinated Johnny most was Welles' fearlessness. He could discuss Shakespeare, cinema, or politics in the same breath, then spontaneously deliver a story so absurd it left the audience gasping. Carson loved the unpredictability. He leaned in, laughed harder than usual, and sometimes even let Welles take over the show entirely, a rare concession for the master of late-night television. Behind the scenes, Welles had the aura of genius, brilliant, intimidating, and occasionally infuriating. Critics noted that his Tonight Show appearances were as close to performance art as late-night TV ever got, intelligent, theatrical, and completely unfiltered. Johnny recognized the value of that artistry. Welles reminded him that conversation could be an adventure, not just an interview. Carson once remarked that Orson Welles was the only guest who made him feel like the audience, at once entertained, enlightened, and a little on edge. Welles' unpredictability, depth, and humor cemented him as Johnny's ultimate favorite, a master of craft, a provocateur, and a true icon of entertainment. And there you have it. Johnny Carson's 10 favorite guests, each one a star who didn't just appear on The Tonight Show, but lit it up with humor, honesty, and heart. From Jimmy Stewart's gentle charm to Orson Welles' electrifying brilliance, these were the people Johnny truly loved sharing the stage with. Which guest do you think would have brought the biggest laugh if they were all on at once? Drop your thoughts in the comments. We'd love to hear your favorite Carson moments. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring the bell for more Golden Age Hollywood stories and legendary late-night tales.